Right, you may or may not be glad to know that I have no slides. I thought you might be all PowerPointed out by now. And also it gives me a great opportunity to mop up on what other people have said. My title, which is again a bit highfalutin, is Staying Ahead of the Curve. And I found myself while the conference went on thinking, well, that was a daft title because I'm left with almost nothing to say that's ahead of the curve. The people we've heard from today are so fantastic, so ahead of the curve, so on the ball, looking at all the difficult areas, really knowing their stuff. So I would say that the whole conference should have been called Ahead of the Curve. And it just leaves me at the end, I think, to perhaps just consolidate, to endorse certain messages, to just take issue with the odd thing and be a little bit confrontational, and highlight where I think we may be going next. And there may be a few things that are new in what I've got to say. Okay, now I think when we do want to stay ahead of the curve, all of us, there's an interesting balance to make all the time between building on what we already know from the research evidence, our own experience, and for myself, as with all of you, I'm sure, bringing our whole selves to this issue. I mean, as Richard said, I've been around this field a hideously long time, around mental health and social well-being. I've developed programs, I've worked with many organisations, and whatever I look at and do, I inevitably bring my whole self to that. And sometimes with some skepticism about what might be going on right now. Sometimes that turns out to be valid and, you know, my gut feeling was the right one, and sometimes it's not. And that takes me to the second half of staying ahead of the curve, which is to not get complacent, to not have the dreaded fixed view, as the Buddhists would say, to keep moving, to stay relevant and be prepared to change. And something that is striking me at the moment is that the world, young people, is changing so rapidly in terms of the mental health crisis, the advent of social media, that things we do with them that worked really well even 5 years ago, pre-COVID, may not be working so well now, or not at all. We've got to really stay open-minded. So I think that's a key message, I think, for all of us to get that balance right. I'd like to say what we're building on. I think we're building on the knowledge that this stuff is worth doing. I mean, you've heard that absolutely clearly all day with these wonderful examples, talking heads, teachers collecting data. My job as a professor has been to review the data for nearly 17 years now it's been developing. And I do this regularly. And you will find it incidentally and many other things in the, yeah, you can probably see that all right, in the dear old implementation guide. Just go onto the Mindfulness Initiative and you will find quite a big fat book there with a lot of, I think, useful thinking in it. One of the things it does is to review the evidence. It's based around 60 research studies, 6 meta-analysis, 9 systematic reviews that bring it all together. And if we look at the overall consensus, mindfulness clearly has overall positive impacts for pupils and teachers on mental health, well-being, social and emotional skills, cognition, learning, and effectiveness. And I think effectiveness for teachers is also important too. It actually helps us in the classrooms to keep on track, to see the priorities and so on. And that includes intervention with adolescents too. So the basic picture we're building on is a good one. But we don't know everything. It's very much a moving picture, and new evidence will be coming out and about helping us to refine what we already know. So we mustn't be complacent and think, right, we've done that, we'll just keep doing the same thing, because we don't know everything and the world is changing. But something we have, I think, realised with a bit of a shock over the last 5 years or so is that any old mindfulness won't do. That you can't just do very quick interventions and very quick training and shove apps out there and give people a little bit of something or other and say, oh, go and do it, it'll all be fine. Now, that may work very well with a really good primary school teacher who knows her or his class really well and is really understands that and they know how to slot it in. But it doesn't work well at all in secondary schools or with kids with difficulties. And I think we're realizing that mindfulness done badly and imposed on people. I mean, as I think Maggie said so well, it needs to be an invitation, not an intervention, but it is often done as an intervention, and people who are not well trained in it can do harm. And when I reviewed the evidence, which is included in the Implementing Mindfulness in Schools guide, there was some quite alarming evidence of teachers who really didn't get what mindfulness was about. and I'll talk a little more about that in a moment, what are the key things we need to get across, and who were at very least putting kids off it. And there is evidence emerging, and we heard from us this morning about the issue around trauma sensitive, that if we do this badly, we can actually do harm. So we really, I think, alert now to the need to do this well, to take time to get properly educated in being effective teachers in this field, and to know our classes really well. So just something I wanted to mention, and Richard Layard triggered me to say this really. I wasn't really going to talk about this, but I will. He said in passing, and he's a lovely man, and I think he's great. Of course, SEAL didn't work. Yeah. Now, as the person who actually was the mastermind behind SEAL and developed it, I've had a bit of an adverse reaction there. I had to go and eat a bit of toast and calm down. But I think it's very relevant here, because it won't be any secret to many of us to know we're all anxiously awaiting the results of the Weare project, which, for those of you who don't know, is a major randomized controlled trial. And we don't know whether it's going to be fantastic and endorse the thing as wonderful, or whether it's going to say, oh, well, you know, this didn't work. No idea, or something in between. We really don't know. And obviously, we're all hoping it does well. But after SEAL, I've always been anxious about what Myriad's going to show, because the result of that randomized controlled trial was so big and so damaging. SEAL basically had been developed steadily over the years and done in a small way. It was going very well, but it was always supposed to be, unlike mindfulness, of course, a framework. So it was a particular thing, which then got shifted and changed through the whole business of doing research on it. And what was evaluated was very different to what SEAL was supposed to be, and done very quickly. But the story came around that SEAL doesn't work, and that had massive political implications, and actually put the whole field of social and emotional learning back by 10 years. So I think I've always gone around ever since saying, beware the randomized control trial. And I say this as somebody who reviews these things and can see their effectiveness, that they don't always do the field any favors. And we do have to take them with a pinch of salt. And we don't know at the moment whether SEAL is going to show that the intervention in question, which was the .B curriculum, is important to say, proved to be effective, as it had already proved to be on a smaller scale when it was rolled out at a big level, or whether not. But I would be worried if it proves to be fantastic. I would be worried if government said, right, let's fling it out there, let's get it into all schools tomorrow. Fantastic. I think that would be most unwise. And I'd be worried if they say, oh, look, it didn't work, let's stop it. But one hopes they won't. What I would say to all of us is, let's take things slowly, let work develop steadily and naturally, to take the results of research very seriously, but not be bowled over by any one piece of research. Whether it's a great piece of research that shows it's fantastic, or whether there was something wrong, we don't know. And again, in our Implementing Mindfulness in Schools booklet, we say just wait, wait till there's been time to evaluate things, to fit it into the systematic review. You know, don't be bowled over by a piece of media or whatever. So that would be my advice to you guys. Whatever is going on in your world, don't leap about like like a cat on a hot tin roof in response to any particular event. Use your wisdom, use the background, and take things steadily. And I think that's quite important for all of us, because it was a real shame that all the excellent, fantastic work that had been going on under the heading of SEAL, using a really effective whole school approach, got dropped. And by the time we did follow-up studies showing that where SEAL had been introduced into schools that were ready for it, it made a really solid difference. Nobody was listening anymore. And there's dear Richard, who is now doing his project and has got the ear of government, just saying, oh, it didn't work. You can imagine how irritating I can find that. I'm looking for Richard for support here. But just looking at the wider world, we've really got to be careful what we do and what we say. And I'd advise all of you in schools and maths and so on, not to go big too quickly, not to think, right, we need a big sum of money here to quickly evaluate what we're doing. Just take it steadily. One of the things we talk about in our Implementing in Schools guide is the importance of action research, where we do something, we find out its effects, we loop back round again, we try and make it a bit better, and we evolve over time in effective practice, rather than taking something as an intervention, measuring it and saying, right, that's the last word on the subject. So I think we need more action research. We also, I do think, and that was mentioned already by Emily, need to make sure that we are measuring or evaluating or assessing mindfulness against appropriate criteria and in appropriate ways. I've always been worried about how the world of medicine and MBCT and the world of depression indicators and so on has been taken lock, stock and barrel in some cases into schools as if they are a clinic or as if they can do interventions in that clean way that you might hope to do that in clinical settings. Schools are educational establishments and we need to be looking at what we're doing in educational terms. I don't just mean learning, though that is obviously important, but holistic approaches. Emily mentioned social and emotional learning, well-being, resilience, effectiveness. All of these things are what we should be looking at, not just medicalising this. And we do run into problems when we evaluate, activity A with the indicators from activity B. It's not comparing like with like. So I think all of us need to stand up more than we have done, I think, for mindfulness as an educational intervention in educational contexts, and really develop that with pride. We're teachers, we're educators. We don't have to be medics. We don't have to be psychologists. Let's be loud and proud about that. Right, so I'll just say a few words about the whole school approach. I definitely could tick that off my list today as the conference developed, listening to the superb work that was being done by Katherine, and I don't need to talk about that. I had an entertaining exchange with Adrian Bethune after that one, after his talk, because he sort of said, I felt a bit airily, we don't really need frameworks, we just kind of live it. And so I sort of said to him, do I have to take you behind the bike shed and beat you up about that? He said what he meant was that, and I would endorse this completely, what we don't want is frameworks that turn into tick boxes, where people think that you can have a framework or a list and you just say, right, we've done this, and it doesn't, we've done it. I absolutely agree with Adrian, and we came to, obviously as we do, we're great friends, to an agreement that it's a balance between the two. You need the framework so you don't get complacent and think you're doing all these things. Secondary schools particularly do need systems and ways of thinking. But you also got to live it authentically. You can't turn it into a tick box thing. So I think it's as with most things, it's a balance between living it at the attitudinal level and actually having some systems and checks and so on about what you're doing. Now, within the whole school approach, I think the most vital thing I've realised through my own life and my experience and the research, I didn't beat you up behind the bike shed. I'm looking at the chat here. Adrian's disrupting it, Richard. Stop him, Richard, please. Is the importance, and I know Adrian will agree with this because we both wrote the implementation guide together, which is how vital it is to start with staff. If we really focus on the well-being and the skills of the staff, we won't go far wrong. If we dash to curricula and so on, it won't go well. What we found when we looked at the evidence around staff is that quite a few of them really don't get what mindfulness is about, even when they're teaching it. They slot immediately into the idea that it's all about relaxation and calm, and that should work. Get the kids to shut their eyes, meditate a bit, and everyone should feel relaxed and calm. They should feel relaxed and calm. I taught in our local secondary school, and I had one of the teachers came along, said after 10 minutes, I can't do this. I've still got thoughts in my mind, and slammed out of the room, which was fascinating. She thought that mindfulness would instantly stop the thought stream. And there's a lot of misconceptions around, even with teachers we try and train well, about what it is, sort of fix-it ideas, that this is going to be the immediate solution to their mental health problem, that everyone's going to behave better, they're going to be more relaxed and calm. So I'd like to say just a little about what we need to be getting across that mindfulness is. Because if, as Jamie argues so well, it needs to be foundational, what is it that is foundational behind all these other things we're doing? I think the first thing is to say, and as Maggie said this very well, it's about being present. It's about being here in the here and now, just turning up really with whatever's going on, whether it's great or whether it's difficult. And I did love that teacher on the video who, when the kid said, my neck hurts now, at the end of the practice, he had good noticing. And that's so important, that we don't just feel that we've failed or the kids have failed. if we haven't had an instant fix it. Finding out what's really going on for the inner person is just so important and absolutely transformational, really, to discover that you can be with the difficult. It's absolutely not just teaching kids how to meditate. In fact, it may not be teaching kids how to meditate, or some kids at all. It's much more, I think, an attitudinal thing of bringing curiosity and kindness and open-mindedness and being with to all of our experience. And again, we can't go too far wrong if that's what we focus on in schools. Working with those who do appreciate different forms of practice, but not imposing it on people, I think is really quite important. And I think it's quite a debate really about the extent to which, and if a skilled teacher can teach it to the whole class, or the extent to which we make it more voluntary. So I think really skilled teachers, and I've had interesting chats with Richard about this, can be very good at knowing their class and knowing which ones to kind of chill out a bit and which ones to keep an eye on. I guess the people I'm worried about are people who come from outside and who don't know the class and who just do a sort of blunderbuss approach that this will be good for everyone. So I think we've got to take care on that. It's also, of course, about a holistic approach to mind, body, emotions, spirit. And certainly secondary schools can turn into being very much about the mind. And I think I did love the practice I saw earlier where the teacher got the kids to really drop into the body and say, it's in the body, isn't it? Oh, yeah. It's really important that we get it, that this is genuinely about the whole person, not just about the mind. And something that's not come up today, but I would add it strongly as somebody who's passionate about this, is it's about connecting young people with nature as well as social relationships. We've talked a lot about the need to understand the inner person and the need to connect with relationships, but perhaps not quite as much as we need to, and perhaps we're going to in future, about how this connects with that sense of being a living being on a planet, connected not through words, not through thoughts very often, but with the, with the entirety of creation, with other sentient beings, with that sense you get when you're out in nature that this is helpful, healing. It's what I teach a mindfulness in nature at my local retreat centre, and we often call nature the third facilitator. You've got the group, you've got the teacher, but the third one, when you get outside, there's a real power there. So I think young people need to be educated in the importance of nature, and more connection between mindfulness and nature is quite important, really. I'm nearly there, Richard. I think I'm on time. I'd just like to finish with the thought that I think we do need in future to be thinking about more co-creation with some of our close allies in education. We perhaps I was pleased when Emily said that they're working in NISP to link up PSHE and mindfulness. I think we've got many colleagues with whom we have very similar aims in personal development, PSHE, in all kinds of areas, well-being, all the examples that Richard talked about in his sort of jigsaw curriculum. What we need to be doing is working with those folks and also demonstrating, I think more than we have so far, why mindfulness is foundational. I think what Adrian and I were sort of chatting about with whether mindfulness replaces the need for some of these other things if you get it right. I don't think it does, and I think if we go in on that heading, we're going to clash with people. I think we need to be really honouring all the perspectives of people we can work with, but to keep showing how what we do is quite unique. It's not about words, it's not about fixing, and so much education is about that. Even PSHE, which I have taught, can so quickly turn into what's the solution here? What's the answer? And mindfulness is unique in helping people connect with the wisdom of the body and being present and just being with whatever's happening. And there's no other part of school really that does that. And in the world of schools which are obsessed with the future, with careers, with everything about the conveyor belt to move kids through, it's just so precious really to get kids to really see, and teachers to see school as somewhere where you can turn up and enjoy being there right now as yourself, with all your faults, with all your difficulties, and to feel that you matter and that you're accepted. And I think that's absolutely unique in a way to what mindfulness in its attitudinal as well as its practice sense can bring to the party. And I think that's what really we should be arguing for. So I hope what we'll all be able to do is to more with those many people in education who are really quite worried about what's happening in our schools, whether we have an education that's fit for purpose, whether we're tackling current challenges, and to really work together, and particularly with the young. I mean, no group in society is more aware that the future, is theirs, and this climate crisis is going to affect them enormously. So we really do need to be working to co-create new approaches with young people and help them to develop their mindfulness and sense of their inner self in ways that they find empowering and helpful.